Yeah, I have issues talking in public, so Angel is my wingman in this type of situations. So hi guys, thank you so much for being here and taking part of our presentation. It's on, I need the clicker. Okay, so first of all, I want to apologize because I have a little bit of a cold, so if I start coughing my lungs out in mid-presentation, apologize. And secondly, Angel might look a little bit depressed, but it's because he's Spanish and they just lost in the Euro Cup, so...
We will survive, we will survive, don't worry.
Never mind that. Yeah, the presentation we'll do this today is a very important one for us. This is our first economic impact study of Portugal, and specifically on Lisbon. We do this in a few selected cities, and Lisbon was one of them. As you guys know, Lisbon is a very important destination for us. Right now, it's a top 10 destination worldwide for Airbnb. So we are very proud in being able to present these numbers and show you how the growth has been, and so that you guys can take a little bit look of how our host community has been growing and developing. Angel will be joining me because actually Angel was the person that led this study, and he has the best knowledge of it. So he's going to drive it. I'm just going to do the add-ons and compliments here. And because I like to stay in front of the stage. So
we'll do some teamwork here. We do these kind of studies in the main market, in the main Airbnb market in the world, and Lisbon couldn't be less. With these economic impact studies, what we want to share with the public in general, it's not only the economic impact or the economic numbers as such, but also we want to share which is the profile of our host and guest community in this city. And by sharing this profile, helping understand how the host community works, how sharing your place works, and how Airbnb helps cities to develop their economies and to empower their middle classes. So let's start by the beginning. Airbnb, it's one of the leaders of the sharing economy, and basically it's a platform that provides a space, a technological tool for people to meet, host offering a space, and guests interested in a local genuine experience. Basically, it's building a community of travelers and hosts worldwide. Why is it special? Airbnb, the main character of Airbnb are individuals. People who traditionally wouldn't be able to share assets that belong to their personal sphere, and weren't able to escalate the possibility of hosting a traveler in the place where they live. So what we see in this phenomenon is that this activity helps to empower middle classes and regular people in the cities where Airbnb thrives. We see that 97% of the booking remains for the host, so most of the economic impact stays with the host. As it directly affects hosts and individuals, we also see associated dynamics such as strengthening the local businesses, strengthening local communities, spreading visits to those neighborhoods that traditionally didn't benefit from tourism, and definitely democratizing tourism and helping spread tourism in the cities. The guests are also different. Guests are looking for an experience as a new way to travel, as a more meaningful trip that help them understand and learn the cities as a local. And finally, I think it's important to wrap up all these elements by saying that we are not talking about a specific trend, a fashion. This goes beyond Airbnb. This goes beyond actually accommodation. These are what we discussed in previous panels. This is the sharing economy. The new technologies are creating a new way of developing the economy to consume, to interchange. And
also, for us, it's very important to highlight the hosts. And this is the hosts are truly our partners. Most of my work here is engaging with the Portuguese hosts. And as you'll see here in the numbers, the experience that they provide are really, really good. And as you'll see also, Airbnb for them is a necessary source of extra income that allows them in fact, to stay in the cities. So let's move forward. And, yeah.
So let's go straight to the point. Executive summary on Lisbon. In 2015, Airbnb guests left in the city 268 million euros. This is what they told us they were spending locally and what they left to the host. Almost 500,000 guests visited Lisbon in 2015, and that represents almost the double as the guests that visited Lisbon in 2014. So we see a clear growth that we'll see in more detail in following slides. Importantly, 72% of hosts in Airbnb in Lisbon only have one listing. One listing means that most of them, the vast majority of them, are individuals. And the average stay of an Airbnb guest in Lisbon is twice longer the average stay in a traditional accommodation. So they stay 2 times longer, but also they spend 2 times more. And this is consistent with the findings we've seen in different international cities. This kind of traveler show these trends consistently. Let's have a look at the host profile specifically. As I said before, a majority of hosts are individuals who are sharing their space on Airbnb to make some extra money, pay for house expenses, or even sometimes to afford staying in the place where they live. And let's have a look at Lisbon community. Here's an important figure. The average monthly earnings of a typical Airbnb host in Lisbon. Typical Airbnb host makes 530 euros per month. So you can see clearly that it's not a main source of income, and it tells you about a non-professional, non-intensive activity that provides a supplementary source of income for individuals. Interestingly enough as well, we can see that the average host age is 39 years old, but that there are 26% of hosts are people older than 50 years. This is something we have studied in other markets, in other countries. For retired people, for elder people, Airbnb provides some extra income, but at the same time, it enriches their social life, and it becomes a very, very important activity for their well-being. The average nights hosted per year also show the same image, the same picture. 76 nights average are booked by a host over the year, which tells again about the fact that most of Airbnb hosts are not professionals, are individuals who do it in a professional manner.
Yeah, and you can see a little bit a split on the map on the places where places got booked, and you see. Yes, usually the more traditional areas, the central areas, have a little bit more bookings. But you can also see that a big part of it is spread around other peripheral areas of the city. You see now Alvalade, Beato, complete other areas that usually didn't benefit from tourism are now benefiting because people are staying there. We're going to go a little bit more in detail in this in the next slide.
Guest profile. We can see that in general we have very small groups on average. It's at 2.6 people per group, average, coming to Lisbon. Here we see the economic activity figure in a little bit more detail. So we see that the 268 million euros split, like 225 million for local businesses or spent in the city, and 43 million paid directly to Airbnb hosts in Lisbon. And here we see the figures of growth. In 2013, we had 78,000 guests coming to Lisbon. 2014, it was 213,000. And in 2015, we are already in 450,000.
And in terms of where are these travelers coming from, as you can see, 81% are from Europe. France takes the lead on this. Interesting data is that in the previous summer, our 3 biggest routes were Seoul to Osaka, New York to Catskills, and Paris, Lisbon. So Lisbon has, once again, has been showing a lot of power and has been growing a lot for us. So it was one of the 3 biggest routes on Airbnb worldwide. This is very, very, very powerful. And as you can see, we have France, 27%, part of it driven by the travelers coming from Paris, 10% Germany, 9% UK. North America is also taking, is growing, it's at 10%. Last year we conducted a survey in San Francisco asking what are the destinations that the San Francisco travelers wanted to stay in Europe. The top selection was Porto. So once again, Portugal is starting to be on top of mind for travelers coming from the States. Then you have other markets. Asia, it's still just 1%, even though we are doing an effort of growing our business there. So we will probably see that number growing in the next few years. And then we have Africa and Middle East, South America, which is partly driven by Brazil, and then Australia.
When it comes to an activity that is not building new assets, that is not creating new assets, but is making a more efficient use of existing assets, we necessarily have to think about sustainability, energy savings, and environmental impacts. Sorry for this. Here we go into a little bit more detail on how the guests spend their money in Lisbon. We see that 37% of the money goes to restaurant, 21% goes to shopping, but interestingly, entertainment gets 15%, transportation 13%, and groceries at 12%. Groceries is particularly fun because every Airbnb traveler knows that you end up buying groceries and buying any item that help you have a more autonomous stay in the place.
And remember that we are considering here that some of the hosts already buy groceries to our guests, so that number is not included there. But once again, remember that most of this is going to neighborhoods that usually didn't benefit from tourism. So it gains even more impact because it's helping the local grocery stores, maybe the local cinemas. In terms of transportation, it's helping the public transportation in Lisbon. So it's all benefiting the city in a whole.
Then more strictly on environmental impacts, we see how competitive traveling with Airbnb is when it comes to providing information on public transportation, but importantly, energy savings, water reduction, and waste reduction. That's a further breakdown on the host community. And here it would be interesting to stop at the 72% of hosts with one listing. Because, in fact, this figure that helps us understand an activity where individuals are key could be complemented with the very real fact that an individual who's renting a room in their primary home could have 2 or 3 listings. Because one listing could be one room, one listing could be another room, and one listing could be the entire place when they go for the weekend, when they go for a week. So we'll see for the figures of Portugal how this number is strengthened when it comes to 1 or 1 to 2 listings. The average length of stay, we saw it before. The monthly earnings, we saw it before as well. And the days hosted annually for a typical host, we also saw before.
And regarding one listing, I think it's very important to stress there, what does one listing mean? So if you are a host and you have one listing, you have one of 3 options. Or you can be sharing a secondary home that you have, might be your a family home, it can be a vacation rental home, it can be a room in the house where you live in, or it can also be the full house where you live in. And when the guest comes, you stay with friends or relatives. And there are a big portion of our hosts that are doing this, once again, as a supplementary income. So when we talk about one listings only, most of them fit on the home sharing category, like people that are sharing one asset that they have, an extra asset that wasn't being used properly, or at least in their perception.
Mm-hmm. That's another important element that we find in other international cities. 70% of guests stayed outside the traditional tourism neighborhoods or the most touristy areas. What we found, or what we share with you, sharing this map over here, is the points where the Airbnb listings are compared to where the hotels are. The hotels would be the darker points. So we see the capacity to spread visits to different neighborhoods and to different areas that we discussed before.
Yeah, and once again, don't want to stress this out much more, but as you can see, we are spreading tourism around the cities. Even when we are talking about city center, we have a lot of hosts that manage to live in the city center because they are doing Airbnb. This allows them to have an extra income to pay their house. And this is, for us, is a very proud situation to be able to provide this extra income to these people.
Mm-hmm. Then let's have a look at the country. We'll see similar data, similar trends. We see how the monthly earnings for a typical host is actually slightly lower than in Lisbon, still showing that it's not the main source of income for the host in Portugal. We see that there are 15,000 actual hosts, or hosts who host, because one thing is that in a free, open platform like Airbnb, you upload a listing. Different thing is that you actually book and you actually host. So we could say that active hosts, we have 15,000 in Portugal. We see that the days hosted annually at the national level, it's 68. And host with one or two listings, it's 85% of the host. Host with one listing, it's 71% of the host. It's more or less what we discussed before. And the average age of the host in Portugal would be 42 years old.
And in terms of geographical span, as you can see, for us, and you can see on the stats, Lisbon is our main destination at this point. Even though we see a constant growth in Porto, Porto has been highlighted in international press as the destination to be on the lookout for. So I think this year and also in the following year, we'll see a huge trend of travelers going to Porto. Then you have Algarve, which is a traditional vacation market. But also very interesting is that you can see in the adjacent areas to the Lisbon area, both in north and in south, you can see that it's also benefiting from tourism. So they are getting more bookings than other areas of the city. We assume that this is because people are also extending their stays, and besides staying in Lisbon, they are also visiting other adjacent areas of the country.
Almost 1 million guests visiting Portugal. The average length of stay, again, doubles the typical. Again, small groups. And again, guests choosing Airbnb to have a genuine experience and to experience Portugal as a local would. I think it's important in this case, and we are running out of time, Ricardo, to highlight the fact that we always showcase, and the founders of Airbnb always showcase Portugal as an innovative tourism destination. It's not by accident that Portugal is performing very, very well through Airbnb. It's not by accident because actually the community is growing, the community is healthy, and also, I mean, why not saying it? The regulations are smart,
yeah, exactly.
And the regulatory framework is useful.
And also, it's very important to highlight, even though it's not listed here, we also have the data in our impact study that will be available on our Airbnb Action website. You can see there that the average rating for stays in Portugal is at 4.7 out of 5 stars. It's a huge number. And considering the volume of travelers we have coming to Portugal, it shows that really the Portuguese hosts are providing an extraordinary experiences to the travelers coming to Portugal.
Finally, and just to summarize, let's remember the main figures that we shared with you. Lisbon attracted 268 million euros in 2015 from Airbnb guests. Airbnb hosts earned 42.8 million by sharing their homes on Airbnb, and 224 million euros went to local businesses in the city of Lisbon. Host average monthly income show an activity, show basically the profile of an individual and show the importance of the individuals in the Airbnb activity in Portugal and elsewhere in the world. Another figure that strengthens this idea is the 72% of hosts who have one single listing, and the average length of stay, and this important and interesting trend, showing that the average length of stay is the double as usual, and the spend locally is also double as usual. So just to wrap up, I think we have to congratulate ourselves to see how the community is growing in Portugal, and how the relationship of the Airbnb community with Portugal is positive and is evolving. This is about innovation. This is about innovating together. And we believe...
yeah, and also a shout out to, we know there are a few startups here that are working in this niche of travelers and home sharing, and they are doing an awesome job also supporting our community. We have the Alojamento Local Association here that's also doing a great job, and then all the players in the tourism industry that are being very progressive thinking in the way they approach hosting.
And today we could see all this thriving startup community as well. I mean, the sharing economy as a socio-economic phenomenon is also helping entrepreneurship. And I'm not talking about Airbnb, I'm talking about the sharing economy in general, and this new phenomenon linked to the new technologies. And today we've had a great example of amazing startups growing around this phenomenon.
Yeah. I don't know if you have time for Q&A. Okay, so you guys drive this.
So, does anybody have any questions for Ricardo or Angel? We have around 2 minutes before the next panel. Okay, we have a question there.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm a big fan. I would like to know if this data or this number you gave us, the 1,530, are free of taxes, or?
No, the local lodging regulations in Portugal set a clear link with the tax authorities, and we are informing the host community about these regulations and encouraging to comply, definitely. And we are engaging with our community to let them understand the local regulations, follow up on the local regulations, and definitely engage with the administrations to make them even better in the future. As another powerful example in the field of taxes, it's important to highlight the agreement we reached with the Lisbon City Hall in order to help Airbnb host to pay the tourist tax to the city. And this applies to all hosts in Lisbon, all of them.
So one last question.
Hi. My question is related to a business traveler, because as you're saying that obviously the majority and the typical customer of Airbnb is leisure-oriented. What are you doing to attract more, or is it in your plan actually to occupy more the space of the business traveler, and if there is anything that you're planning to do to attract those customers?
I can take this one. So in terms of business travel, some of you are probably hosts. You saw that we did an update on our platform in which listings can say that if they are business travel ready or not. So this was a big win for us. Also, we assembled a team that's working on tackling business travel as a client, so bringing more companies to use Airbnb as a service for their employees. So yeah, it's something that we are doing. It's still in its early stages, but we expect that in the following months or years, we'll see a good increase in that sense.
As a traveler, as a business traveler myself, I think there's also a need to dispel some myths on staying at someone's place when you're traveling for work. Sometimes we think of white-collar workers going to a hotel or to an apartment that resembles a hotel as much as we can. Myself, I'm super grateful to go to somewhere where I find someone who opens the door and says goodbye in the morning. We really see lots of business travelers using Airbnb and going to somewhere else's place.
We actually have one last question here. Yes.
Hi. So I'm just interested in the 28 to 29% of hosts. You say 71 to 72% of hosts have one listing. Can we know a bit more about the 28 to 29% of hosts, just out of interest? Because what Airbnb is about is authenticity, and it's about the owner of a house who wants to have more income to cover the costs, etc., etc. What about the other 28 to 29%?
True. The other 28 or 29% are hosts who have more than, I would say, two listings would be around 80%, so 20% would be more than two listings. These guys, we consider them, local lodging, tourism professionals, and they have the regulations that apply to them, and they have to be defined. Their profile has to be as well understood as the profile of the individuals, and we are definitely, I would say, working on this profile with both the authorities and the professionals. Why? Because generally the regulations for these kind of hosts came first and are more clear than the regulations for the individuals, actually. Because as professional tourism services providers, they have regulations that adapt much better using the typical classical regulations. So basically, these 20% of hosts are guys who are renting several listings. These exist.
Thank you so much. We don't have time for more questions, but I know there are more people who want to ask you questions, so maybe you can speak with Angel and Ricardo down there. Thank you. Thank you.